G'day guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Red Bull's closest rivals are hopeful they have discovered the secret that's allowing Red Bull to lap so much faster than every other team this year. Mercedes reckon they can actually run their car far lower than they previously thought. That might be crucial to these other teams catching up to Red Bull over the rest of the season. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, the French ran it again. Pretty entertaining story this that may or may not come true. The 2023 Monaco Grand Prix has been threatened with another protest, right? We even saw today in the Berlin Prix for Formula E, there was some protesting going on. It's happened all over the world the last few days. The snooker, all sorts of stuff. Of course, the most famous example really of, was it the Just Stop Oil protesters last year in Silverstone that were, if anything, rather lucky that the Joe crash happened, because otherwise could have been a disaster on the Wellington Straight. This is a slightly different story here, with the French Trade Union Confederation threatening a blackout of the Monaco Grand Prix to protest new pension reforms proposed by the government. Not exactly sure how they intend to make that happen, but fair enough. I wouldn't put it past the French protesters to find a way. And they've also threatened, so the Monaco Grand Prix, the tournament at Roland Garros, right? So of course the French Open for tennis, and then the Avignon Festival, I suppose, could end up in the dark. We won't let go, they say. So we will see if any of this comes true. I know that Charles Leclerc is already concerned for the Monaco curse to come and get him yet again with some weird circumstances. So we'll see. Formula 1 say it should be fine. We're prepared to deal with it. I'm not really sure how they'd execute this in the first place, but it would be an interesting attempt. So I guess stay tuned for that one. No sprint race in Monaco, of course, thankfully, right? But we do have one next weekend in Baku for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. This is the back-to-back, the first time we've got a double header of the season so far, going from Baku straight to Miami after that. And there are concerns all around the paddock, certainly from the team principals. I think the drivers quite enjoy this. Well, some of them enjoyed the sprint, some of them don't. Verstappen definitely doesn't. The teams that have the most to lose, more than likely, don't particularly enjoy them. Red Bull have certainly been against them over the last couple of months. Mercedes are slightly more in favour now than they were before, maybe because it just gives them more chances for something interesting to happen on the weekends. But Aston Martin and Mercedes are both given their concerns over the idea of having a sprint race in Baku. It's already a circuit, especially through the castle section, right? Charles Leclerc's had a few moments there over the years, as have many other drivers. Plenty of crashes and issues over the course of our time in Azerbaijan, and an additional sprint race of however many laps is maybe not optimal, some people would say. Alonso and Aston Martin have said, well, it's a bit concerning because if you crash in the sprint race, then, which is liable to happen, your chances of getting the car ready to go again for Sunday might be a struggle. Or is there the cost involved as well in that, because any damage that happens to a car, that is subtracted fundamentally to the amount the team can spend on development. So, you don't want to go to put it in the wall. And Alpine, after their collision back in Australia, will probably have to think, you know what, guys, let's try and not do that again. And even Toto Wolff says 2 qualifying sessions per se is not something so bad, as in the new idea of the sprint format, which is not yet coming in for Baku. But he says in qualifying, you've got less opportunity to put the car in the wall. But with 2 races, there is more at risk, especially with the back-to-back with Miami. If there were to be issues for cars and teams in the sprint especially, then, there's only a few days to turn it around for Miami. So could be a big job on the team's hands. And I think because of some of these reasons, Ferrari have decided not to bring any upgrades apparently. They've got things in the works. They're bringing things pretty much every weekend. We believe the upgrades they're bringing in the next couple of weeks are more than likely planned before the season began in terms of where they were going to go with their car. And after that, probably from Imola and beyond, there will be not a new concept entirely, but some more significant aesthetic changes to the Ferrari, as we are expecting to see from the Mercedes as well. So they probably won't bring any upgrades there. They might be some small things as we expect from Mercedes as well. If you guys have been living under a rock the last few days, you may not have known that James Allison is returning in a more full-time capacity to the technical director role. We've got some more information actually over the last 24 hours as well as to exactly what this means. So James Allison was working 3 days, it seems, with Mercedes AMG. Now it's going to be full-time, 5 days a week, and will be fully focused and has overall control of the car design. Mike Elliott will take on some additional extra duties and will mainly focus on their strategic plans going forwards, their regulation changes for 2026 around the new engine, the sustainable fueling. So that's where Mike Elliott will now go. James Allison is back in charge of the car development, and this is largely going to be aligned for next year. We know that Allison's been working on the Imola concept from right after Bahrain testing. That was the rumour, because they knew, I think back in February, we'll see this in a second actually, that their car wasn't really going the way they wanted it to in terms of wind tunnel development. They knew they'd have to take a different approach. approach, and Alisson's been working on that for rather a long time. But the bulk of this is going to be getting 2024 right and nailing next year's car, because frankly Mercedes can't introduce an entirely new chassis like they would like to for the W14, and could if they could still spend $400 million a year. But that's not the case, so you know, the real bulk of Alisson's work and any progress that he makes with the car is probably going to be seen more in 24 than this year, but he has been working on the Imola upgrade as well. But this is the key piece here for Mark Hughes in terms of what Red Bull have been able to accomplish. Last year we saw an awful lot about the ride height of the Red Bull, because in the ground effect era, the lower you can run your car, the better. But of course, if you're a Mercedes W13, you're going to bounce all the way down the straight. The porpoising phenomenon was very real for the W13. For the Ferrari F175 as well was very much a phenomenon, but the Red Bull was able to run low and avoid the porpoising largely. Okay, there were some small oscillations, but they weren't really evident to the naked eye. And this year, the Red Bull is able to run at very low ride heights again, and that's how it's able to generate so much from the floor. The rest of the car can be quite slippery to the air, which means it goes really fast in a straight line, and they generate so much from the floor, and they've clearly nailed that part of the regulations. Now, Mercedes came into this season somewhat concerned, it seems, from last year's W13, that they weren't as aggressive as they could have been with the W14, basically, and they designed it to run at a higher ride height than it actually is capable of doing. And this may be a realization from other teams now that suffered with porpoising last year, maybe Ferrari included as well, that Red Bull are actually able to run at lower ride heights than even they expected. And we'll talk about some of the benefits of that here in a second with their suspension setup. The Mercedes are now also changing. So the rumor is they're going to move away from the zero pod, of course. There will be a host of regular aerodynamic tweaks based on the realization that the car can be run much lower than previously assumed. Perhaps stung by the problems of last year's W13, the 14 was developed in the simulation around a certain range of ride heights. Bahrain showed the team it had been over-conservative with that range, and the regulation prescribed floor changes allowed it to be way more tolerant of very low ride heights. This is something that clearly the Red Bull guys saw coming, and they realized that they could still run their car very low and generate the maximum possible effectiveness from the floor of the car, and Mercedes maybe weren't so keen to do. And as with everything Formula 1, in order to optimize for lower ride heights, the floor has to be changed to a certain degree. They've got to make some tweaks to the suspension, to the floor design, and there will be a host of new floor parts coming in the near future. So this is something that Red Bull clearly realized from early on. Mercedes have only just figured it out, but these changes have been underway for quite some time. Even as it says early on, the gains of the original concept in the wind tunnel dried up in February, so before the season began, they've been developing this new version, which is why they are probably further advanced than Ferrari will be. And even from a side-by-side image here, you can just see how low the Red Bull is able to run to the ground, and part of the reason for this is their suspension design. They've gone with a high anti-dive and anti-squat suspension. Basically what this means, we discussed it a few weeks ago now, the car is set up in a way that when the car brakes or accelerates, it has very little pitch angle, as in it varies very little. If you imagine a motorcycle would, if you brake it could do this, if you accelerate you could go up on a wheelie, and this is the pitch angle, right? A car does this as well to a smaller degree, but you imagine if you're running your car really low to the ground and you decelerate very hard and your suspension is set up in a certain way, the front of your car might just straight up hit the deck, which obviously isn't what you want to do. So by setting up their suspension to effectively eliminate this phenomenon 3 times more than any other team is currently doing, they're able to run their car very low and flat all the time. Like the car's super flat, pretty much whatever it's doing, acceleration, braking, doesn't matter, which means they're able to generate more downforce. Now that does carry some downsides that we talked about being exacerbated, such as tyre warm-up and stuff that we saw, I think, in Australia. But yeah, other teams might have thought, you know what, we actually can run our car lower than we thought, and we'll have to make floor adjustments and suspension adjustments as a result. And those are all the rumours we're hearing now from Mercedes, that floor and suspension upgrades are coming shortly. And the lower ride height, of course, if the car isn't going to porpoise, then carries a whole host of other benefits as well. So very interested to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. I know that a lot of teams lately have talked about the possibility of tricks, right? Even Hamilton used the word trick the other day, and it kind of implies, I think other teams have used the same term to understand the trick of their DRS, the trick of how they're able to ride over the curb so well, have such incredible traction. And I mean, look, Mercedes will hope that they find that, so will Ferrari, so will Aston Martin, but Aston Martin seem to have a better idea of it. They just don't have any straight line speed, which is what is holding them back right now from competing. But in the near future, we might see multiple teams bring new floor parts, bring new suspension parts to try and replicate what Red Bull are able to achieve right now. And part of that might be Mick Schumacher's job. He's actually increasing his workload on the simulator from the Imola Grand Prix in Emilia-Romagna onwards. onwards. Not really sure why this hasn't been the case already, to be honest, but he's going to be spending more time at Mercedes base in the simulator, testing setups and all that type of stuff. So I wonder where that's going to go. The other thing to mention before we close out here is Daniel Ricciardo. I know there were some rumours the other day that he was quite excited to get back into Formula 1, but he made this comment over the last 24 hours or so. I think it's clear what I don't want. I don't want any Formula 1 seat next year. I don't want to just start from zero. So, you know, it's kind of like last season, right, where he could have maybe got a seat at Haas or elsewhere, but decided not to. I'm not coming from an arrogant place, but I'm just past that, right? He doesn't want to join a backmarker car. And fair enough for Danny Rick. The issue is, if you look at the top 5 teams, is there a seat available in the next year? It's hard to imagine that there will be. It's possible, right? I think the most likely, if there's any chance, is probably Red Bull, to be honest. Obviously, he's there right now as their 3rd reserve driver. There has been some friction between Sergio Perez and Red Bull. Christian Horner's corrected a few things that Perez has said. Perez has made some very interesting comments over the last few weeks or so about Red Bull being a one-car team before he arrived, and the setup situation in Australia that apparently caused him to go into the wall. The Christian Horner then corrected his opinion on that on both counts. So who knows? When Danny Rick initially joins, the rumour had it that he picked up some bad habits from his days at McLaren, but now he's much more competitive on the simulator than he has been before. So maybe there's a world in which Danny Rick gets the seat again alongside Verstappen. I don't know. I'm not convinced of that reality, but given these words from Daniel Ricciardo, it doesn't seem like he's going to be returning to the grid. I think the chances are pretty low, actually, based on this evidence. But look, maybe Red Bull is his best chance, and he's, of course, already halfway there, you could argue. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.